Good afternoon. I'm Richard Knowles with Richard Ed Knowles and Associates, and my co-author today is Bruce Vaughn with the Center for Chemical Process Safety. I'm going to bring you a case study demonstrating a successful plant leadership transition that improved process safety performance. I'm Richard Knowles. I worked for the DuPont Company for about 36 years, got 40 patents while I was in research, and wound up serving as manager of several large chemical plants. Since retiring in 1996, I've been a leader in worldwide safety and leadership consulting. I've written a number of papers, several books, and I'm the creator of the Process Enneagram and Partner-Centered Leadership process. Bruce is a chemical engineer with lots of hands-on and theoretical experience. He worked for the DuPont Company, Ross Holman, Cabot Corporation, Baker Risk, and now the Center for Chemical Process Safety. And he's also the author of several important papers and books. This is the plant in which this study took place. It's the DuPont, now Chemours plant in Bell, West Virginia. The plant is about a mile along on the banks of the Kanawha River. We handled the second highest number of hazardous materials in DuPont. For example, that big white storage tank you see at the bottom right of the picture is 110 feet high, 100 feet in diameter, and can hold 40 million pounds of anhydrous ammonia. At the time I was there, we had about 1,300 people at the plant. It was active, it was a big old culture, and it was needing a lot of help. In this 19-year case study, I'm going to show the participative leadership process, a highly participative one, called Partner-Centered Leadership, clearly produces superior total safety and business performance than the traditional top-down management process. Leaders and managers are needed in order to achieve excellence in safety. Leaders and managers are people. What they do is leadership and managership. So leaders focus on people, change, and the future. They see organizations as living systems, complex, adapting, self-organizing networks of people. And they value the open flow of information, building trust, and a sense of belonging. And it's through these values that excellence spreads across the organization. Managers, on the other hand, focus on systems, processes, and the status quo. They see organizations as if they're machines and people as interchangeable parts. They value reliability, predictability, stability, and control. We need leadership and managership in all parts of our activities. As you rise higher in the organization and have more responsibility for people, the leadership component of this grows. Now, partner-centered leadership has these kinds of cultural dimensions. It's safe for anyone to speak up, share information, ask questions, provide feedback to anyone at any level. Decisions are made by people close to the work. Those who are closest often see what is really best needed. And people come together to solve problems. Trust levels are high, and the gap between work as imagined and work as done closes. I participated in this process by walking the plant 3 to 5 hours a day for 8 years. I didn't make decisions out in the plant. I watched, I asked people how their job was going, what could I do to help them, how could we make the processes they're using work better. My job was to help them begin to open up, share, and work together in a different way. In the top-down management process, these kind of cultural characteristics show up. Managers tend not to know the people very well. They tend to stay in their offices. People are expected to follow orders and don't question or talk back. Communication only goes through line managers with little feedback. The process suffers from what we call the iceberg of ignorance. Only about 5% of the information in the organization is known by the people at the top. It's like an iceberg. Most of it is below the waterline. And there's a lot of blame, finger pointing, and low trust. We often talk about going to root cause, which is usually where the investigation finds someone to blame and stops. And the gap between work as imagined and work as done is large. In this study, I used two safety metrics. One was the total recordable injury case rate. This is the occupational safety and health data that tend to show up on the OSHA 300 log. This is a lagging indicator, but it's a way to keep track of what you're doing, but you don't lead safety from using this information. The other metric I used was the toxic release inventory, which is reported to the EPA each year, and it's a total amount of hazardous waste and chemicals released to air, water, and land. It includes accidental as well as permitted releases. And it's a lagging indicator for process safety management. An indicator of how well we're doing our process safety management is how much stuff gets out of the system and into the air, water, and land. The better we're running the processes, the lower will be the waste levels. The better we're running them, the less there will be accidental releases. So a low toxic release inventory report shows that the process safety management was being run better and better. When I was using the partner-centered leadership approach from 1987 to 1995, the three arenas of safety were linked: occupational safety, occupational health, and process safety management. Within each of these disciplines, there's a highly managed way in which to operate to get the results you need for each discipline. But the overall leadership with partner-centered leadership, bringing all three of these arenas together, sharing information, building relationships, helping people to interconnect, helping people to talk with one another, was the way in which I led the plant using this partner-centered leadership approach. With the new managers coming in after 1995 out to 2010, and about 5 of them came in during that period, the process of leading was broken apart. Occupational safety and health were kept together. They had their own disciplines. They were led by the people in the organization at the lower levels, like first and second line supervisors. They used the partner-centered leadership discipline we had developed. They had very strong operating discipline. The process safety management piece was pulled apart, and the managers took that up for themselves, which was the traditional way in DuPont to run process safety. The managers allocated the resources, they allocated the people, the money. They began to cut back on the number of people doing process safety management. They allowed the intervals between inspections to drift. Work order backlogs began to pile up. Operating discipline went down and releases went up. This picture also is one that looks very much like the difference between the way the American Society of Safety Professionals and the American Institute of Chemical Engineers approach safety. When I go to the American Society of Safety Professionals meetings, I hardly hear anyone talking of process safety. And when I'm at an American Institute of Chemical Engineers meeting, I hardly hear anyone talking about occupational safety and health. These are seen as two separate groups. I brought them together, which made a difference. On this chart, you can see the results of what happened with these two different ways of leading. The chart on the left is the total recordable injury case rate. It goes from 1987 to 2006. When I came into the plant in 1987, our injury rate was about 6, which was terrible. We began to move the safety performance with partner-centered leadership, and improvements came, and by 1991, we were down at a 0.03 type of frequency rate. And the people sustained that all the way out to 2010. I only go to 2006 on these charts, but it actually went further. When I left the plant in 95, the people continued to self-manage and use the partner-centered leadership approach, and they maintained terrific safety performance all during this period. If we look on the right-hand side at the toxic release inventory, you can see that when I came into the plant in 1987, the emissions to the environment were over 6 million pounds a year. Using partner-centered leadership, we brought those numbers down and down, and by 1995, the number had dropped down to about 275,000 pounds, which is a lot of stuff. But when you consider that for a big plant like that, that's about half of a tank wagon of gasoline a month that is being emitted to the environment, which is low and pretty good. When the new managers came in and they pulled the process safety management apart from occupational safety and health, emissions began to rise and process safety management discipline began to deteriorate. They allowed the intervals between inspections to drift. Work order backlogs piled up. They cut back on engineering manpower to do the work. They stopped the communications among the engineers and the operators, which had been so helpful in the early years with the partner-centered leadership. So you can see that with partner-centered leadership and the self-managed approach that people took, total recordable case rates were terrific. The toxic release inventory numbers changed very significantly as the process of managing safety changed. Everything began to fall apart, and finally it culminated in the disasters on January 22nd and 23rd of 2010. 25 pounds of oleum were released to the environment, and that makes a big white cloud. Over 2,000 pounds of methyl chloride were dumped into the Knowles River, and they had a phosgene release that resulted in a fatality. And the investigation around the phosgene release really illustrates the deterioration of process safety management. Phosgene was used as a raw material for the process. It was connected to the operating equipment with a flexible hose covered with a braided stainless steel cover. That hose was to be changed every month. In the inspection after the fatality, they discovered the hose had not been changed for 7 months. So the sloppy process safety management procedures allowed that to fall in the crack, and a man died. On September 21st, they had 160,000 pounds of methanol dumped into the Knowles River. And on December 3rd, 2010, they had 2 lost workday injuries when hot methylamines release burned 2 guys at a sample trap. At this point, the Chemical Safety Board was amazed about what was going on in DuPont and what had happened. And they came in and did an investigation. And they reported that while the occupational safety and health were still at world-class levels and the best in DuPont, the process safety management had fallen all apart, even to the point where DuPont was not even using its own safety procedures for process safety management. And it's a shame to have seen that happen. It's not the DuPont company where I was working back in the 80s. This is quite reminiscent of what happened at the Deepwater Horizon, where just a day or two before the explosion, the people on the platform had received safety award for occupational safety and occupational health, while underneath, process safety management was falling apart and culminated in this huge explosion and all the fatalities. So in conclusion, partner-centered leadership process works best. It's best for the people. The total injury recordable rates were down about 97%. Works best for the environment. The toxic release inventories were down about 96% while I was there up to 1996. Process safety was better. We kept the doggone chemicals in the pipes. And it was also very good for the business because productivity went up 45% and earnings were up 300%. Those numbers came in 1995, just before I was transferred. So you can see from this case study, with concrete, hard data, that partner-centered leadership is clearly the best way to lead. If you have any questions or comments, please call me at the number shown on the slide. Email me at richard@rnknowlesassociates.com or go to my website, or www.rnknowlesassociates.com. Thank you very much. Have a good day.